What's going on, you guys? This is Joey Central. Welcome to part B of the Hello World of the programming tutorial. So this time, I owe you guys a bit of explanation. Because last time, I just simply told you guys to follow along and we kind of just written this little program. And I use that in quotes. But we really didn't do too much, and many of you don't really have a clear understanding of what happened. And in fact, I would wager most of you, after the video, had more questions than answers. So I owe you a bit of answers myself. So in this video, I am going to go over every single line of code in a program we've just written, and I'm going to explain to you, in the most basic of terms, what is happening, so you have a better idea of what goes on. And for the most part, this program we have written right here is the foundation of most of the programs that we're going to be writing throughout this tutorial series. So this is going to make more sense the more you do this. But for now, you're just going to have to trust me on this and allow me to explain line by line. Okay, so I'm going to explain everything but this. The reason why I'm not going to explain this is because this is a Visual Studio specific thing. It's some kind of special header that Visual Studio implements. I don't know what it is. Like I said, it's been a while since I've last used Visual Studio. I'm using this program particularly for this tutorial series. So I don't know why, but all I know is that it does not function for whatever reason without this. So we're just going to say, okay, we're going to have to include this as one of our libraries in every one of our programs we write, and just leave it at that. And then we have another include statement. This time we are including the IO stream, or the input-output stream. And this is part of the standard library inside of C++. Now, usually we include the includes at the very top of our program because we want to make it so that no matter what function we're working on, and I will cover functions later, don't worry. But basically, we want this to be within the entire scope of the program we are working with, instead of having to copy and paste the includes and almost every single function we do. So we use the includes up top, and what the include does is it includes headers, whether it's from the standard library or if it's one of our custom headers. And trust me, we will get into custom headers later. But for now, we're just going to stick to making the CPP programs. Now down below, using namespace standard. What does this mean? Basically, if we did not include this, and those who are using Xcode, you'll notice something. In the beginning of the program, when you made your first project using Xcode, if you're using Mac, you'll notice that that wasn't there, and instead you had standard, and there's a scope resolution operator right here, and this is kind of what your program looked like. Now, I told you in the beginning, I was really vague. I told you, don't worry about this, just delete it and include that the line using namespace standard. But you don't know why. The reason why is because when we use using namespace standard, what we're telling the program to do is that, listen, you don't have to specify what library you are using in order to type cout and end line. We know that you're using the standard library, so there's no need to type and to use the scope resolution operator to determine what library we are using. Now, and this is kind of controversial in the programming world because many people say this is bad practice. And usually when you have, and the argument for that is because when you're working with multiple libraries and they both have the same, each of them have the same name in one of their, let us say, member functions, then you kind of have a confliction. The program gets confused, and which library's member function are we using here? So that's where the whole controversy of using namespace standard comes from. But for the sake of simplicity, we're going to use this because It is much simpler not having this and having to use the scope resolution operator every single time we do something as simple as printing out text, for an example. But when we get into header files later, I'm going to try to explain why using namespace standard is not a good idea. Then in that case, that's when you will have to implement the scope resolution operator to help you determine which library you are using when you are working with a header. But you don't need to get into those details right now. Do not get confused by that. Everything will make more sense to you as I explain it to you later. But right now, I am just trying to explain to you what's going on in this program and this program alone. Okay, so now finally, when we get to line 9 in this program here, it might be a different line number for you, but basically we have int main. Now what this is this is our main function. This is our main stack frame, and essentially a stack frame is pretty much how a program operates, pretty much. But most of the magic happens inside of the main stack frame. I will go more into details on stack frames when we cover functions, because essentially stack frame is kind of just a fancy word that we use to describe functions when we're talking about functions conceptually. But for now, we're only going to worry about the main function, because that is where the program operates in. So inside of our main function, and now remember one thing, we have a curly brace here, and you guys might have noticed that. This curly brace allows us to recognize that we are working within the main function. When we open up a curly brace, that means that when everything down below is the code that we're going to work with, and all of that will be inside the stack frame, or the main function. And then the closing curly brace indicates that we are done. The main function is complete. And you have to make sure you include these curly braces, because if you don't, you're going to get a compilation error. Maybe not now, but when you try to compile your program. Okay, so now we have the cout. In case it wasn't clear in the last video, what cout does is it outputs text. So in this case, it's just going to output hello world. We can change it to something else. We could say hello world, how are you doing? ? And the program should still operate the same kind of way. See, hello world, how are you doing? Now, since we are using the using namespace standard, we don't have to use the scope resolution operator when we say cout and end line. And I mean, why should we, right? Because we're not working inside of a header file. We are working with the main program itself. And all we're doing is just simply displaying text. Why do all that extra work just for something that mundane? So that's why we're using the standard library. Now finally, you notice this little return call, and with the number 0. The 0 is just a conventional way of saying, listen, the main function, we're done. We're done here. It's time to close down this program. That's what it's doing. And what a return call does in general is it terminates the stack frame, or once again, it terminates the function. In this case, it terminates the main function, which means it terminates the program itself. And by programming convention, we usually say return 0, which usually means it has ended successfully without any errors whatsoever. Now, when we get into much later into debugging, then we'll usually then we might return with a different code, like code 1, which usually means that there was an error in one of our try catch statements. But again, that's something we're going to concern ourselves with much later. And then finally, after the return, and that tells you there's nothing else in the main function. So yeah, I understand this is not the most sophisticated program. This is not the most exciting thing we're going to do, and we're going to do more exciting things later on. I feel like the reason why this video is necessary is to help you guys understand what's going on behind the scenes of this simple program. And also, it'll help you kind of get the gist of what's going on, so that way you get more comfortable building later programs. And in our next video, we're gonna actually start covering variables. And there's a whole bunch of different variables that are in C++. And it's pretty much important to know and distinguish each and every type, because in C++, it's picky about variables. And it cares whether you are using an integer, a double, a long. It cares about that. But that will be in the next video. For now, this is just simply the explanation of the hello world. So we're finally starting to get to more interesting things. So anyways, if you found this video helpful, then do like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will be uploading more and more videos to come. This is Joey Central, signing out.